Now, I want to pause here because this is the point in the video where I need to knock down a myth, and it's an important one. You may have seen headlines or videos claiming that scientists or the government know the exact date this earthquake will happen and are hiding it, or that this kind of coverage is just designed to generate fear and clicks and funding. I want to be really direct with you. Nobody, anywhere, can predict the exact day, month, or even the exact decade an earthquake like this will happen. Earthquake prediction, in the sense of a specific date, does not exist as a scientific capability, and any claim otherwise is not coming from real seismology. What scientists can do is study the pattern of past earthquakes, measure the ongoing pressure building on the fault using GPS stations and ground sensors, and describe a probability, a rough likelihood, over a long window of time, like the next 50 years. That's very different from a prediction. It's more like a doctor telling you your risk of a certain health condition based on your family history and your test results. Useful, important, not a countdown clock. Okay, here's the part where I want to give you some relief for a second, because everything so far has been the hard part. The good news is that this isn't sudden information. The Pacific Northwest has known about this risk for decades now, and building codes in Washington and Oregon have already changed significantly because of it. Newer buildings, especially schools, hospitals, and bridges built in the last 20 years, are designed with this exact earthquake in mind. That doesn't mean every building is ready. It means the risk isn't being ignored. It's actively being engineered against every single year. But here's a second wave of concern that most people don't think about, and it's honestly more relevant to daily life than the shaking itself. The bigger danger in a major Cascadia earthquake isn't just buildings falling down. It's what happens after the shaking stops. Bridges connecting communities could be damaged or impassable. Some coastal roads, the only routes in or out of certain small towns, could be blocked by landslides or debris. Power could be out for weeks in some areas, not hours. Water systems in older cities could be damaged underground in pipes nobody can even see, meaning clean water isn't guaranteed to just come back on when the lights do. That compounding effect, shaking, then isolation, then infrastructure failure, is what actually turns a natural disaster into a prolonged crisis. It's not the 6 minutes of shaking that ruins people's lives the most. It's the 6 weeks after, if a community isn't prepared for it. And there's an additional layer here, specific to the coastline itself, that's worth understanding. Because Cascadia is an offshore fault, a major rupture would also generate a tsunami. And unlike the 2011 event in Japan, where people sometimes had 10 or 20 minutes of warning before the wave arrived, communities directly on the Oregon and Washington coast could have as little as 10 to 15 minutes, in some cases even less. The shaking itself would be the warning, not a siren. Not a phone alert. The ground moving under your feet would be the signal to move toward higher ground immediately without waiting for confirmation. Now let's talk about what actually helps, because this is the part that matters most, and it's not complicated or expensive. The single most useful thing anyone can do, whether you live near Cascadia or near a completely different fault line somewhere else in the world, is store water. The rule of thumb from emergency planners is 1 gallon per person per day for at least 2 weeks. Not because scientists expect the worst-case scenario every time, but because water systems are consistently the slowest thing to come back online after a major quake anywhere in the world. Second, know where your gas shutoff valve is and keep a wrench near it. After major shaking, gas leaks are one of the leading causes of fires in the hours immediately afterward. Knowing how to shut off your own gas line before you ever need to takes less than 5 minutes to learn. Third, have a battery-powered or hand-crank radio. Cell towers can be overwhelmed or damaged. But emergency broadcast radio has been one of the most reliable communication tools in every major earthquake disaster of the last 50 years. And fourth, and this one is less about supplies and more about people, know your neighbors. In basically every earthquake recovery study ever done, the communities that recovered fastest weren't the ones with the most supplies. They were the ones where people already knew who lived next door, who had medical needs, who had a truck, who had tools. Preparedness isn't just a checklist. It's a relationship with the people around you, built before you ever need it. None of that requires panic. It requires about an afternoon of your time, done once, and then basically forgotten about, until you need it. So let's come back to that rubber band one more time. It's still stretching right now underneath the Pacific Northwest, exactly as you're hearing this. It has been for over 300 years. It has released before, and the evidence for that release is sitting in drowned forests in Washington and handwritten scrolls in Japan, written by people who felt a wave and had no idea where it came from. It will release again, not on a schedule, not on a date anyone can give you, but it will. And the question was never really whether it's terrifying. The question is whether you understood it before it happened or only after. Somewhere off the coast of Oregon and Washington, right now while you're watching this, two pieces of the Earth's crust are locked together. They're like a rubber band. that's been stretched and hasn't snapped back yet. That rubber band is 300 miles long. It runs from Northern California all the way up into British Columbia. And it's been stretching for over 300 years. Scientists are monitoring the risk of a 9.0 earthquake on the West Coast, and I know that sounds terrifying. But that's not quite the full picture, and here's why that matters more than the scary headline does. By the end of this video, you're going to understand 3 things. First, why a fault line you've probably never heard of could produce one of the biggest earthquakes in recorded history. Second, how scientists actually figured this out, using clues that were hiding in plain sight for a very long time. And third, what this actually means for you, whether you live on the West Coast or 1,000 miles away. I want to be upfront with you about something. The next few minutes are going to be the hard part. I'm going to walk you through what the science actually says could happen, and some of it is heavy. But I promise you, we get to the reassuring part, the part where I tell you what actually helps. And that part is real too. I'm not saving it for later because it's an afterthought. I'm saving it for later because it means more once you understand the full picture. Okay, before we go further, I want to ask you something, and I actually want you to answer it in the comments. Tell me how far you live from the nearest coastline, anywhere in the world. Not because I'm trying to scare you, I'm just curious how many people watching this live closer to a fault line than they realized. Here's the deal with this channel, if you're new. We break down one of these risks every single week using the actual research behind it, not just the scary headline you saw in a news article. No hype for the sake of hype, just what we actually know and what we don't. And if this is useful to you, hit like right now, not for me, but because it helps this specific video reach someone else who's never heard of this fault line and probably should. Okay, let's get into it. The fault line I'm talking about is called the Cascadia Subduction Zone. Subduction just means one giant piece of the Earth's crust is sliding underneath another one. Picture 2 conveyor belts. One of them, the ocean floor, is slowly sliding underneath the continent, underneath Oregon, Washington, and parts of California and British Columbia. Most of the time, that sliding happens smoothly. Slow, steady, no drama. But at Cascadia, it isn't smooth. The 2 pieces of crust are stuck together, locked. Like that rubber band I mentioned, being pulled tighter and tighter, storing up energy instead of releasing it. And that's the whole problem in one sentence. Energy that should be releasing a little bit at a time in small earthquakes is instead building up and building up and building up. Think about stretching a rubber band slowly with your hands. For a while, nothing happens. It just gets tighter. You don't see any change. But the tension is real, even though nothing is visibly moving. And at some point, if you keep pulling, it doesn't slip a little. It snaps all at once, and all that stored energy releases in a fraction of a second. That's what scientists believe is happening under the Pacific Northwest right now. Not a metaphor. An actual physical process happening in slow motion over centuries instead of seconds. Now here's where it gets interesting, because this is not a story that starts with a seismologist in a lab. It starts with dead trees. In the 1980s, a geologist named Brian Atwater was studying the coastline of Washington state, and he found something strange. Along the banks of certain rivers, there were entire groves of western red cedar trees that had died all at the same time, centuries earlier. Not from disease, not from fire. They looked like they had been suddenly drowned in salt water. Ghost forests is what they're called now. Standing dead trees, still rooted in the ground, preserved for hundreds of years because the mud that buried their roots was low in oxygen, so nothing could rot. Atwater realized something. If a stretch of coastline suddenly dropped several feet during a massive earthquake, ocean water would rush in and drown forests that used to be safely above the tide line. That would explain the ghost forests perfectly, but he needed more proof than a hunch, so he went looking for a second clue. And here's the mystery part, because this next piece of evidence came from 6,000 miles away, on the other side of the Pacific Ocean, in Japan. Japanese historical records are incredibly detailed. They go back centuries, and they include very precise notes about tsunamis, because tsunamis have devastated Japanese coastal towns many times throughout history, and buried in those records was an entry from the year 1700. A tsunami hit the eastern coast of Japan in the middle of the night, with no warning earthquake felt locally at all. That's the key detail. No local earthquake. A tsunami that seemingly came from nowhere. Except it didn't come from nowhere. A tsunami needs an earthquake to generate it. If nobody in Japan felt the shaking, the earthquake didn't happen in Japan. It happened somewhere far away, powerful enough to send a wave all the way across the Pacific Ocean, and quiet enough locally in Japan that only the wave itself gave it away. Scientists cross-referenced the exact date of that tsunami with the tree rings in those drowned, ghosty forests in Washington state, and they matched. January 26th, 1700. An earthquake near Cascadia, one violent enough to instantly drop the coastline and drown entire forests, sent a tsunami all the way across the ocean to Japan, where it was written down by people who had no idea where it came from. That's how we know Cascadia has done this before. Not a guess, not a computer model. Actual physical evidence, cross-checked between drowned trees on one side of an ocean and handwritten tsunami records on the other side. And once scientists had that anchor point, 1700, they went looking for older evidence too. They found layers of sand and mud in coastal marshes, deposited by earlier tsunamis, stacked on top of each other like pages in a book. Each layer represents one of these massive earthquakes. And by counting those layers, scientists now believe Cascadia has produced a major earthquake roughly every 200 to 500 years, going back thousands of years. The last one, remember, was 1700. That's 326 years ago, which puts us somewhere inside that historical window. Not certain, not scheduled, but inside the range where the rubber band has historically tended to snap. Let's talk numbers for a second, because a number without context is just noise. Scientists estimate the next full Cascadia rupture could produce a magnitude 9.0 earthquake, possibly higher. The magnitude scale isn't like a regular number scale, where 9 is just a little bigger than 8. Each whole number up is about 32 times more energy released. So a 9.0 isn't slightly stronger than an 8.0. It's roughly 32 times stronger. And compared to a 7.0, the kind that can already devastate a city, a 9.0 releases around 1,000 times more energy. To put that in a picture you can actually hold in your head, the 2011 earthquake off the coast of Japan, the one that caused the Fukushima disaster, was a 9.0 on the same subduction zone types. A fault. Cascadia is capable of producing an earthquake in that same class. And the shaking itself wouldn't be brief. Most earthquakes you felt, if you felt any, probably lasted 10, 20, maybe 30 seconds. A full Cascadia rupture is expected to shake the ground continuously for 4 to 6 minutes. Sit with that for a second. 6 minutes of continuous, violent shaking is an enormous amount of time for a building, a bridge, or a hillside to hold together.